Welcome to Crafty Crows. It's lovely to see you all here. We have a really brilliant lineup tonight. We have the fabulous Zoe Brooks, who has just had her book published, The Owl Unbound. We're looking forward to hearing her read from that. And also we've got the wonderful Adam Horovitz from Stroud, who has got, I don't know what he'll be reading from, he's got various books and past publications. So we're really looking forward to that. Just before we begin, I want to just raise the fact that we've got an event on the 8th of March, which is International Women's Day, which is Raised Voices. It's going to start at 7 o'clock. Please look out for this, for the posts, because this is going to be an amazing event. We have 18 ladies reading their words, and also each poet is going to read a chosen published female poet. So all in all, it's going to be 32 raised voices for Women's Day. So it's going to be something quite amazing. And that, I think I'm going to stop with the notices and get going. I'll start us off with a poem of mine that was published by Ink, Sweat and Tears back in October. So I haven't read it before, so here we go. It's called In a Home. When he sits in a chair by the window, my father's head shines like a hard-boiled egg. There's even a dip in his skull where someone's put a spoon to open his cranium. This was the surgeon who broke through to the yolk, scooped out the soft mass of the tumor. When he sits in his chair by the window, my father's head droops to his chest as he snores after lunch while he waits for me to visit. When I arrive, I see his pale pate through the glass, fine hairs knotted into a silver halo. I walk towards him, take his hand from beneath an ill-fitting cardigan that doesn't belong to him, and greet him with a kiss. He raises his head, looks at the clock on the wall, lances me with a glance as sharp as a spear, and smiling says, "You're 8 minutes late." Thank you. Okay. Now, I'd like you all to mute if you've got background noise, but also if at the end of people performing, or at least at the end of the open mic, we'll have an applause for everybody. That's probably the best way. Okay, so we're going to start straight off with Michael Stindler. Welcome, Michael. Would you like to read your poem, please?
Yeah, sure. Didn't expect to be leading off, and very thankful. I'm going to do a piece, an ekphrastic piece based on a painting in the Denver Art Museum that is by, well, actually, y'all probably know way better than most folks where I'm from that Sir Joseph Wright at Derby was most famous for his paintings of horses, but that was not the only things he did. And this is based on this, which is Elizabeth, Mrs. John Bostock, and it's from 1769, which was roughly, unfortunately, 200 years later. Women in the US were just starting to get the ability to open their own checking accounts. So this is Elizabeth's tale. Yes, it's true, I'm not exceptionally pretty, but my father provided an ample dowry to make sure I'd be suitably wed. And when Mr. Bostock nodded his head, my fate was sealed with nary a thought of what I wanted, as if I'd been bought, like the purebred horses regally framed, for which Mr. Wright is rightly famed. And so I sit with his brush, and with his brush he paints skin my husband ne'er deign touch, he who prefers to consort with courtesans of a lower sort, never caring about my own comfort. But I do not dally like a tart with those who try to steal my heart, because I know them insincere, and also because of fear the scandal a dalliance might rake, if discovered, and then, so to speak, I'd be little more than a vanquished ghost, my presence unwanted by any host. And so I sit and while the hours away, ruing my accursed wedding day. And I just wanted to do that as an acknowledgement that this is Women's History Month, at least here. I don't know if it is.
Brilliant.
There, yes.
Thank you ever so much, Michael. That was lovely. I'll give you a nice applause at the end. That was brilliant. Thank you very much. Whew. Well, we'll go on now to Agatha Palmer. Agatha, are you there?
Yes, good
Welcome.
evening. Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you very much. I didn't know that I had a slot, so very quickly, thank you for that. I'm going to read a poem, perhaps the poem that my book took its name from. My book, From the Land of Marmite with Love. That's my first book of poetry, and the opening poem is called Migration. On returning home, the scent of Mum's home makes me weak at the knees with relief. My longing is satisfied by her arms and a bouquet of beeswax, face cream, perfume, pâté, apple pie and cheesecake cooling. Ah, and her arms, silky soft and tender. How do we make up for the time apart? The last days before the flight back, we get pensive, irritable, dart tearful glances. I weep when the plane peels me off my homeland. This always used to embarrass my sons. By the time we reach the clouds, rebooting starts, my psyche reframing all the reasons why I managed to live and work there. Now, back in the land of green hills and Marmite, this quaint island with sweet thatched cottages, this country where I grew into an adult, where our friends and my son's roots are. I've come to love it, and it feels at home here. It has loved me back into a hybrid me, which wouldn't have existed otherwise. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. That was lovely. I don't think we've got Mark Simmons here, have we? I can't see him. So if it's all right with you, Lucia, we'll go straight on to you. And actually, if Christine Whitmore, would you be okay for an open mic in a little while? Okay, brilliant. So let's have Lucia Daramus, please.
Thank you.
Hi, welcome.
Thank you. My poem is Natural by Lucia Daramus. Oh, I don't know what is the poetry. Yes, I don't know. I know nothing. Just I'm feeling in my mind something which is struggling and stretching as an algae, a blue algae from the ocean. And my soul is gathered in the feeling of a pearl, like in a shell from the sea. I'm running, running, on the shore of the yellow sea, and I'm thinking, I don't know. Yes, I don't know what is poetry. Yes, I know nothing, just I'm feeling, and the rainbow from the sky, mauve sky, is flowing on my eyes, on my heart and my soul. My soul is capturing all colors. I smell and taste colors. The red is melting in pink, with sweetness in warm flavor. The green, yes, the green, dancing in sugarness, sourness, savor. Yes, I don't know what is poetry, but it's music, is confounding with the voice of the sea in my heart's lyric, with the roar of the wind, with the howl of the bluebird, from my soul which is struggling in poem. Lyrics are springing and are written on the waves, on the sand from my perfume grain of my heart, are written on the death from my imagination, because the music and color of words are inside my mind. Even I don't know what is the poetry. Nu știu ce e poezia, dar sunetele ei îmi farmecă existența. Eu non so cosa sia la poesia, no sé si es poesia. I don't know what is the poetry, but its sounds spell my life. Thank you.
Ah, I love poems that go into a second language. To actually listen to the lilt of another language is superb. Thank you, Lucia. I always love you reading your poetry.
Thank you.
So we will go on now to Pratibha Castle. And after Christine Whitmore, I think we'll have time for Stuart Carswell. So if I let him know in advance. Okay, Pratibha, please go ahead.
Thank you. Hello, everybody. So I'm going to read a poem from my forthcoming award-winning debut pamphlet, A Triptych of Birds and a Few Loose Feathers, published by Hedgehog Press. My mother died in 2007, and that inspired me to go to university and do an English and creative writing BA. And a lot of the poems in this pamphlet are around my relationship with my mother and my mother's death. This one is called On Reaching Heaven. Your eyes, the bubble sparkle of a Moe Schlancha. You'll float across in that cherry cardigan you favored towards the end. Stuck at home, you toasted the hours with a click of needles, knitting socks for friends. I dropped by or phoned less often than I later wished, though that last time I brought the cake. A treat we'd baked together years before. Your warm hand on mine, steering the heartbeat symmetry of the wooden spoon through an anarchy of icing sugar, butter, splash, or more, dependent on the mood, of Bewley's coffee. The spill of your song fizzing the shadows of the basement kitchen as I jammed together sponge, open-hearted as your love. The glory of walnut halves tallied 1 to 10 onto my palm to be set with caution on the buttercream glaze. Baked in honor of the day, the sun with its celebratory gleam, unseasonable. 10th of the 10th, the date you and I each entered this world, and that you, even with your 6th sense, never guessed would be the day you'd leave.
Oh, that was beautiful. Thank you so much, Pratibha. That sounds, if you want to put the details of your chapbook on the chat, please do if people want to get a copy. Okay, thank you, Pratibha. Okay, so we're now going to have 2 people off our reserve list. The next person up is Christine Whitmore, please. Welcome. You are muted, Christine.
Sorry, thank you.
That's all right.
Great, the reserve list works. Very organized. I love it. Thank you. I'm going to read a poem from my collection, Sudden Arabesque, published by Oversteps Books it's written a few years ago. Actually, it might be written in the States, where I lived for many years, because like Agatha, I'm a bit of a hybrid me. But I just the other day saw a patch of squill, blue squill, right here, very close by. So it's relevant to here, it's relevant to now. It's about the excitement of spring and how language in the end can just go totally crazy and get jumbled up. Spring. It's distracting. Everything's changing wherever I look. An electric blue patch of squill nearly makes me crash, and all the twigs are suddenly beaded with leaf buds, while the yellowness of the willows is brightening hourly. I park so I can watch. I jump out of the car and dance along. I'm beaming like a lunatic, and really you'd think I'd be used to it by now. I've seen it happening over 50 times in many different places. I should know that as soon as these words are written, they'll be old. The leaf buds will be emerald. You'd think I'd give up trying to catch the delicate insinuation of the air, which can't be caught. The words collapse, they tumble and mesh together, breezily interlaced in a tangle of green, the yellow caravel entirely madrigal, and every jonquil ravishment squeezed fresh.
Wow. Beautiful, beautiful language. Thank you so much, Christine. Thank you. And now we have Stuart Carswell.
Hi there, evening everyone.
Hi, welcome.
I'm going to read a poem, and it starts with an epigraph that comes from a newspaper article from the 1870s. And the article is about the discovery of prehistoric animal bones in a cave system near the River Wye, near Symonds Yat. Wow. So this poem is Extinction on the Tenant Farmer's Holding. The tenant of the property, a Scotch farmer, said he had for some time been manuring his fields with the bones of extinct animals which ages ago ranged over his holding. And that's from the Western Mail, 7th of March, 1874. The cave housed a treasure trove of bones, relics of creatures extinct for millennia, for protein, roasted for nutrition and flavour. My tenant farmer had them crushed up and ground down to spread across his rented fields, fertilise the soil, raise crops from bone. In the half-light, in the blinking dark, I have a vision. We are all tenants to earth, and with my complicity, in the relentless way he administers and disregards the outcome of extinction, solely to prolong our own survival, I fear how my own bones may be exhumed and powdered and manured across fields if humanity itself collapses into extinction. Thank you.
Wow. That was really lovely. What a wonderful inspiration from an article. Brilliant. Thank you so much, Stuart.
Thanks.
I think we still have space for one more person off the possibly two, depends on the length of their poems. Margaret Royal. Margaret is here. Welcome.
Hello.
Margaret.
Yes. I'm going to read you a poem from my memoir of childhood, The Road to Cleethorpes Pier, because I was raised in the good old butt of the comedian joke seaside town Cleethorpes. I've written a lot about family. This one has quite a bit of Lincolnshire dialect in it. Anyway, it's called Nanny Buttle's Pork Chops. Nanny Buttle sang as she worked, a Methodist hymn learnt in chapel. Her country ways annoyed my dad. He raised his eyebrows when she slurped her cooled down tea from a saucer. So common. Or covered the quarry tiled floor with newspaper in bad weather. It's siling down, mind your sen, she would scold. Wednesday, being laundry day, she came to help my mum, a complicated task requiring zinc copper, dolly posher, scrubbing board and mangle, all stowed safely away in the glory hole. Hairnet gripped securely in place, gingham overall with sleeves rolled up, she stood ready for another hard day's graft. Corky, the cat, always knew she was coming, slinking off, crouching on the brick wall at the bottom of the 8-foot, patiently waiting, aware Wednesdays meant Nanny's pork chops. If he was patient and resisted the urge to dash between busy legs, he might get the scraps. Nanny was not a cat lover, often chiding him. Stop your snecking, you by near skelled it. A country lass at heart, Nanny always relied on phases of the moon in Old Moore's almanac. Thunderstorms panicked her, so she would keep a close eye on gathering black clouds. Oh, looking rare and black, our bull's mother's new, she observed, and with the first clap of thunder, she was off like a greyhound to hide under the stairs. Quick as a flash, Corky would steal her pork chop. Mission accomplished for him. Thank you.
That was lovely. Thank you very much. Brilliant. And we just have time for one more. So Annie Ellis, if you'd like to do your poem, thank you. Welcome, Annie.
I've got to find one, sorry. I'll put
Sorry, I sprang that on you.
I'll read Nature on Fire.
Brilliant.
My book here, my first poetry book. Trees are ablaze with gold, pom-poms of autumn fizz, a paint box of assorted wigs. Autumn brings a shiver to summer's heat. Dry leaves fall, red as rosy sun, with tints of yellow ash from the fire. Burning a carpet below, shadows of lumber lie, black as night, dropping sparks as they die. Golden nuggets crumble into soil. There's no flame or smoke.
Lovely. Thank you so much, Annie. Sorry, I was writing you a comment there. That's why I was late applauding. Would everybody like to please unmute themselves and give a round of applause for all our open micers, Michael Stindler, Gerald Kells, Agatha Palmer, Lucia Daramus, Ratiba Castle, Christine Whitmore, Stuart Carswell, and Annie Ellis. Big hand. It was a really lovely, very quick open. Thank you. And now we come to one of our most exciting parts of the night. Zoe Brooks. Zoe has had a recent publication with Indigo Dreams in October 2020, Owl Unbound, and it is a beautiful book. If you haven't got it, please find out how to get it. If you'd like to put that on the chat later, Zoe. She has had poems published in a variety of online and printed magazines, including Ink, Sweat and Tears, The Rialto and Pennine Platform. Her work also featured in Michael Horowitz's Grandchildren of Albion. Her long poem for voices, Fool's Paradise, received the Electronic Publishing Industry Coalition Award for the Best Poetry ebook in 2013. We're really, really pleased to have Zoe Brooks with us. An enormous big hand, everybody.
Thank you, Josephine. I'll start with the first poem in the book, which seems the appropriate place to start. It's about my uncle, who was a farm worker on a farm just north of Winchcombe. Naunton Farm. Sometimes, still, I come across your death again, as I sign executor's deeds, calculating interest that is beneath interest. I discover my mother's words. He died today. And the shock of it makes my hand pause. My hand reaches down to the little cat with no ears, which rubs against my ankle, crying. You had hands big enough to hold that cat in your palm, carrying her away from the burning barn. My mother made a brief appearance in that poem, and she does so again in this one. Junctions. You are always here when I am not. I am not now, but lost in the railway sidings between the fox track and the willow herb. She's not with us, my mother would say at the dinner table as my fork lay idle beneath my hand, lost in her own world. No world of my creating, but lost, certainly. A junction of lines with the points frozen. This next poem, my mother appears, alas, in full as the center of it. It relates to her death and an incident that happened just shortly before. The gypsies in the room. It is the unstitching of the mind, we tell ourselves, watching as she slips further from us. Like an old purse, the lining opening to reveal lost coins. Morphine and dementia see the gypsies in the room, silent in a row. The ancestors come to greet her, we joke, to watch over the journey we cannot take with her. Not yet, anyway. The coins jingle, crossing the palm of the ferryman. Having talked about my mother and her death, I'm going to go to birth or pre-birth, and it's a poem of my experience of ultrasound when my son was not yet born. Ultrasound. Refracted by water like a silver fish, not pausing beneath sounds, turning which way? Through darkness, through warm waters and the constant beat of my heart, you flash past. We've a wriggler here, she says, seeking you out like a shoal of cod. Then, suddenly, you are still and stand clear upon the screen, a small child with head and flickering heart. We measure the circumference of your skull, your femur and spine. It is not time yet to draw you into this cold, air-bound world. The next poem relates to an experience I had when I was a teenager. I went on holiday to Greece and I shared a room with a lady called Margaret Partington. Margaret was the mother of one of Fred West's victims. And it was before Margaret knew what had happened to her daughter, just that she'd disappeared. Margaret had a constant dry cough, I remember, that the doctors said was psychological. The lost daughter. The female body is 55% water. The rest is dust. The fullness in the throat will not be cleared. Deep in the night, when the farm dogs clamour at the moon, the throat tightens and contracts. Under the floorboards, the dark heaves and swells. This fullness, this emptiness. You clear your throat, and still the dark swells. You have dust in your throat. Whose dust? Whose dust rises in moonlight? Whose dust lies upon lungs, clogs veins, fills your head with fears? There are so many images that in the night sidle between the sheets. In the day, perhaps they can be put aside, wiped from the window like condensation. You rise and rinse her out of your throat. But then the dust gathers again and the pains mist over. The drops join and begin to flow. Having all these poems about mothers, I'm going to talk about my dad. he deserves a mention. And we're very lucky as a family that we have a recording of my dad being interviewed on the radio, which he made shortly before his death. Radio interview. Not quite my father's voice, its depths broken by a charge of illness. I hear it now, as I failed to hear then or chose not to, the muffler of morphine. As if the tongue was larger than the mouth and cannot strike the waiting teeth. He retells memories, tales eternal in their retelling. The burr of childhood sticking to the radio speakers. Still, I smile at it, remembering being held a bear cub on his chest, feeling the reverberation of his voice against my cheek. Wow. And at this point, I'm going to hand over to Adam to read a poem. Adam, are you there?
I'm here.
Great.
It's a very nice thing to be able to swap poems. Zoe's going to read one of my poems in my set as well. I love this poem. This is The Midday Fox. My demon is in the garden. Nonchalant in the noonday sun, he bites burrs from his fur and snaps at fleas. Not quite a fox, he grins at me in the window. All the time by the fence, the cat watches, waits, pretends not to care. My demon came out of the brambles by the skeleton of the bomb shelter. Under the ash trees, he waits for me. The autumn sun slopes over the rooftops. The light collects in pools. Over the compost heap, through the flies, my demon goes without a backwards look.
Thank you. Thank you. Wow. Adam Horovitz read one of my poems. Okay, right. Well, I'm going to follow that with the title poem of the book. Again, it's about my dad, and it's a memory, one of my earliest memories. We'd moved into a house and he took me to explore the garden, and we found traces of the previous owner's rather weird hobbies. Owl Unbound. First, we found the snake, a ball of coiled skin and muscle in a pickling jar at the base of the hedge. I followed my father up the outside stair to the stable loft. On one side, the railway signal without a track. On the other, a brick wall pocked as the moon that would crumble like cheese in the rain under the thud of my ball and send it flying sideways, escaping me. The tread creaked as my father entered, and I followed into the dim. I looked around, but saw only an empty perching post. The owl had gone with its master. At my father's instruction, I held out my hands as if ready to receive bread and wine. But into my bowl of fingers, he dropped a pellet, a galaxy of small bones and feathers cocooned in fur. That night, I woke. The moon, shredded by clouds, hung over the stable roof, and an owl called, unbound, from the cypress tree. That is a lovely, that's my, as I said, that's the title poem. The next poem I am going to read, if I can find it, and I was meant to be giving the numbers, the page numbers. It is on page 24, is a poem about Punch. My first job was working with the satirical left-wing puppet theatre in London's Covent Garden. Imagine my surprise when my feminist boss told me I was going to be working on a festival of Punch and Judy. I soon learned that there was more to Punch than sexist violence. Punch. In the beginning, when God rested from his labours, Adam took a knife and cut down a young elm. This was his first act of destruction, and Adam smiled at the sap in it and saw that it was good. Adam took again the knife and carved in his own image a wife-beater and a layabout, a preserver of sausages and a counter of bodies. Then, as Adam sat outside the closed gates of Eden, just for the hell of it, he gave his creation a stick to beat the devil with. Punch sat at the window, watching the street below. In the hot September night, he heard windows breaking and the crash of stones on riot shields. A bottle landed beside him, empty. A waste if ever he saw one. He decided to join the fun and took up his big stick. "If you can't join 'em, beat 'em," said Punch. Punch was fed up. He had damp rot in both legs and woodworm in his nose. Worse still, him downstairs had very cold hands. He switched on the television that had fallen from a broken shop window. "Theatre is dead," said Punch. "I will enter the movies. Death Wish 5 and Bloodlust 3, that's the life for me." "You're too old," said Judy. "Then I'll enter politics," said Punch. Punch stood on a ladder trying to paint the town red. Above him, the policeman and the bailiffs, the hangman and the devil stood on his fingers and ground them flat. Punch wanted to take his long stick and knock them down. But that was just a show, something to feed the stupid crowds. It was different here. So he stood on Judy's fingers instead and beat the baby. And he said, "That's the way to do it." The policeman and the bailiff watched amused. They'd get the bastard sometime. No need now. Punch screamed abuse, and the people laughed at him. The louder he shouted, the more they laughed. After the show, he sat on a bench in the dim light of the booth. Beside him, in a glass of gin, sat his voice, slightly stained, a piece of bent tin bound like a wound by a reed of cloth. Punch took up his big stick and smashed the glass. He wanted to bellow like a bull, but his own voice lay there, laughing.
Wow.
My next poem is also from my time in London. I worked in Lambeth, which is where Charlie Chaplin grew up. A starstruck young Charlie would stand outside his uncle's pub and watch as the music hall stars arrived in all their finery for the after-show parties. But he was also watching an old man called Rummy Binks who looked after the horses. And in the end, Rummy Binks was much more important. Charlie watching. Rummy shuffles forward. In the gaslight, all things are black and white. All things flicker. All things are blurred at the edges. Rummy by name and Rummy by breath, his tread is unsteady. He has feet the size of marrows in black broken boots. A small man, he has a giant's trousers. The gentleman of the halls calls Rummy over. The man's tie pin is made of silver, his woman of full flesh and fuller pleasure. The gentleman offers a penny with bejeweled hand. In the gaslight, all things disappear. The gentleman's checkered suit, the horse's sweat, the woman's stark perfume. In the gaslight, all things fade but this. Rummy's splayed feet, the dark oval smudges of his eyes, and baggy trousers. All things are forgotten but Rummy. And the little boy in the shadows watching, Charlie watching. And if I may, I will finish on a very short poem, which I know Josephine likes. It's a magic realist poem, which talks about a one-sided relationship, a theft. I stole the moon last night, shoved it up my sleeve and slipped away home. It swims in the bowl like a fat goldfish, quietly circling. The news anchor announces its disappearance. The screen shifts to beaches unwashed, to surfers bereft. But in my room, the water rises and falls, lapping at the glass rim, and I feel the tide of blood rush in my veins. You look up at the screen and then away again. You do not see the light flooding the room, nor the moths battering the window. I stole the moon for you, and you did not even notice. Thank you.
Oh, thank you for reading that one, Zoe. It is my favourite. It's fabulous. Wonderful poems, beautifully written and fabulously performed. What a mixture. Please, everybody, would you unmute yourself? And if we were in an open auditorium, I'd be asking everybody to stand. That was beautiful. Thank you so much, Zoe Brooks.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Right.
Thank you so much. And thank you, Adam. I love the two voices together, and I know you're going to reciprocate, so it's going to be beautiful. Whew. Well, now the only thing we can do is to have a break. Jason, if you'd stop recording now. I've lost you, Jason. Oh, there you are. Oh, it keeps moving. It's very confusing. Right, brilliant. Okay, welcome back, everybody, to the second half of Crafty Crows. Brilliant, brilliant performance by Zoe Brooks there. And now we're going to start another set of online open mics, starting with one of my favorites, which is Derek Doran. I can't see you, Derek, but I hope you're there. Hello, Derek. Is he off? Is he gone? Derek, he's obviously still at his break. So, brilliant.
Hello, I'm here.
Oh, you're back. Good.
Yeah, sorry.
Did you hear me call your name and say you're being
I heard
on
my name, and
good. Welcome back.
That 10 minutes.
That was 10 minutes.
So.
Yes, it's 12 minutes past 8.
I do apologise.
All right.
Okay, I'd like to read from my recent collection, Wasp in My Cockpit. This one's called Crash. It's about an incident that happened to me back in the 1980s. One of my cultural reference points of the 1980s is the Smiths song, Reel Around the Fountain. That's what was playing on the car radio when me and my mate Ken crashed on the M62. We were on our way back to Liverpool from the 1984 League Cup final. Even now, I can't have a car crash without thinking about that song. We'd beaten Everton 1-0. Graham Souness scored. Ken's dad, Eddie, came out to pick us up. He was a blue nose. We were a pair of gobby red shite, the last thing in the world he wanted to see. Even now, I can't see Graham Souness on the telly without thinking about Eddie. I damaged my glasses in the impact, just when Morrissey sang about falling out of bed twice. Shit happens. Sadly, there's usually someone worse off. I needed new specs anyway. Even now, I can't fall out of bed without thinking about being pinned and mounted like a butterfly. I ran across the carriageway and tried to pull a guy out of his wrecked car. He was one of those worse off people. He was caked in blood, and he asked me to stop pulling because it hurt too much. Give him his due. He laughed about writing off the wife's car. He was a red and she was a blue, a mixed marriage. She was going to be livid when she found out. She'd say he wrecked her car and then died on purpose. Even now, I can't think about dying without thinking about not being able to not die. Morrissey was callously oblivious, and he'd bank his royalty check one day. The rest of the Smiths were in this too. I don't imagine they gave a single thought for poor Eddie's plight, or the bloke in the wrecked car, or the bloke's bereaved wife. Even now, I can't bank royalty checks without remaining callously oblivious too. They built an IKEA superstore at the spot where we crashed. I went back once and there was no plaque, no acknowledgement. It's as if Reel Around the Fountain had never been written. Perhaps if we'd crashed to Heaven Knows I'm Miserable Now, things would have been different. Even now, I can't visit IKEA without thinking about how miserable I am. But life goes on. I left the M62 behind and took to wearing contact lenses. I moved to Scotland and began crashing my car on the M8 near the gasworks. Glasgow's miles better, a sign there proclaimed. No, it fucking wasn't. I crashed twice in 2 days in the exact same place. In fairness to them, the Smiths had no hand in either incident. Even now, I can't turn the gas on without thinking about the M8. If we ever play Everton in a League Cup final again, it'll throw up old memories, rip open the scars. These days, I listen to new music on Spotify, but bands never sing about fountains, none of them. Even now, I can't reel around a fountain without opening up old wounds. Thank you.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you, Derek. So lovely to have you back on the mic again. It's great. Again, Derek, if you want to put your books on the chat, so many of our open micers tonight have got their own publications. So please look on the chat if you want to know how to get their books. Next up, we have another fabulous lady who we had as a feature a couple of months ago. So please, a warm welcome for Kathy Carson.
Thanks, Josephine. I'm going to do this little one because pretty soon I won't be doing it because I won't be able to, and that's a good feeling. So this is about COVID nursing, and it's called Nightingale. I am not a make you better nurse, and you don't want me at your RTA. I am a palliative trained cancer nurse. I hold your hand as you pass away, but this isn't nursing as I know it. This is like training for the SAS. I am so far from my comfort zone. I've never been so stressed, and all day long I shout at colleagues through a face shield, through a mask. My name is written on my apron because there isn't time to ask, and 2 weeks ago we told you that you might not make it through. But before we placed you on a ventilator, this maze of wires and leads and tubes, you messaged, you phoned your loved ones, and you thanked them for being in your life. Your voice, a ragged whisper as you said goodbye to your wife, but your battery ran out of charge and we were running out of time, so I wrapped my phone in plastic and I told you, please, use mine. I'm looking after you today. God, I feel like I could drown. I'm trying to force compassion through this face shield, mask and gown, and every layer builds a barrier. I have no idea how to climb. I want to rip these gloves off so I can feel your hands in mine. I want to stop the incessant beeping, the hiss and wheeze of these machines, and the turning you on your front in bed and the hope that you can breathe and your family should be here right now. I should not be standing in this space because no matter how hard or how much I care, I can never take their place. When my heart and my spirit are broken, my hands, my feet, my face are sore. And every night the same bitter prayer, please, don't make me do this anymore. They turned off your machine today. And I pulled your curtains round. God, I watched your chest rise up and fall. And God, I tuned out all the sound and thought, I am not a make you better nurse. And you don't want me at your RTA. But I am a palliative trained cancer nurse. So I held your hand as you passed away. Thank you, Josephine.
Thank you, Kathy. Thank you. And to know that this comes from your heart, that you have to experience this every day. Fabulous, fabulous poetry. Thank you so much. Ooh. Difficult to follow that. So Jason, we're going to put you on the spot, sorry.
Great. Okay, this is a brand new one. And it's a kind of a reaction to a hidden pandemic, one of plastic waste and single-use plastic. And this is called Pandora's Jar. And there is some reference to Greek gods in this. Our disposable society spreads a synthetic plague, not a punishment from angry gods, but a precursor to impending extinction. It's no fiction by idealistic hippies or radicalized minds. It's blind consumerism by hysteria, a marketing machine made in our image that scrapes an artificial itch, a craving for excited fingers to panic buy, then casually cast aside. Apathy will not bring change, nor will ignorance. Our single-use obsession seems unstoppable. The willingness to discard, spreading intentional blindness, shutting out what we wish not to see. And yet, there are mortals passionately administering the rush of positive change, planet doctors prescribing caring remedies, doing what they can to fix our failings. Meek activists rising to unblock empty ears. Curious scholars birthing the sparks of invention to reduce our waste infection. Hygiea's nurses stitching green wounds, and a slow but steady saline drip gifted by Poseidon, a sea change of opinion that we must rapidly vaccinate our feverish compulsions to eradicate this oil-based, man-made virus. This is our problem. It will not recede unless we seek to heal ourselves, collectively grow our resistance to the wants of disease, make our world a healthy, nature-first place. We must face the germs of hype and the hives of fashion with sleeves rolled up, skeptical syringes at the ready to inject friendly, influential treatments that compel us to pick up and speak up, reuse, keep and make, recycle, buy less, buy kinder, choose nature, to educate and lead by example. Even though our excuses and our temptations are constant and ample. I choose a future of green, a circle of renewal and an open hand. We used to run this ever-giving land, as playful and free as Hermes, as strong and resilient as Achilles. But at some point our ankles were cut, nicked by the spinning arrow of progress. It made us sluggish, dependent and needy, spellbound. This is not a fairy tale, and we have slumbered for a century. This is our finite time to be kissed awake by Helios, bandaged in warm rays, our sight regained by Apollo's light, our time to battle our manufactured sins of lust, greed and avarice. Forged in Ares' furnace, the war of wastefulness. I can't let my fate be decided by the rule of dice, for my actions will be louder than the poisoned alibis of false gods. For I devote myself to Gaia's abundance, her invaluable prize, and I beg of you to join me before our future is spent and we pay the ultimate price.
Thank you, Jason. That was really brilliant. Thank you. Very important messages. Okay, if we move on now to Beth Brooke. Is Beth here, please?
Yes, I am.
Oh, brilliant. Hi, Beth. Welcome.
Hi. Oh, I'm having a lovely time. This is wonderful. Given what Josephine said at the start of the night about poems that are read out are considered in some places to be published, I've changed what I'm going to read. So I'm going to read something that comes from Secret Chords, which is an anthology that was published last month by Folklore, and I have a couple of poems in it. I'll read you this one, which is very domestic, really, and it's about taking my older son to university for the first time, and the power station that it refers to is Decca. We take our son to university. Inside the car, we feel the rhythm of the road. The keening of the wheels plays upon the skin. Outside, the morning is everything October can be. A liquid brightness so clear and sharp it cuts. Its beauty pains the eyes. The sky is cloudless. Above the lines of the field, the red kite wheels, slices through the air, an effortless moving away from us. The road signs mark our progress, like the counting down to the moment of launch. 10 miles left. Conversation stalls as the power station's cooling towers come into view, scab on the horizon of an otherwise perfect landscape. We fall to unfamiliar silence as the slip road drags us to the end point where, like the red kite, you lift off and soar away.
Brilliant. That was a beautiful last line. Beautiful. Thank you, Beth. Now we go on to Becky Who. Becky, are you there?
I am, yes. Sorry.
Oh, brilliant. Becky's in France. So lovely to have you with us.
Thank you for having me. I'm going to be reading from my Craggy photocopy because it's all I have. Sorry, I can't boast anything more impressive. Usually I try and memorize, but I've had 2 hours sleep, so I'm not risking it tonight. Here goes. Just a short one. This is called Contradictions. I care about fitness enough to sign up for Zumba classes on Mondays, but not enough to attend them regularly. I care about my looks enough to spend too much on makeup, but not enough to spend the time putting it on properly. I care about my weight enough to hurl messages of hate at the mirror each morning, but not enough to resist the packet of biscuits late at night. I care about my children's upbringing enough to read all the parenting textbooks, but not enough to apply their advice to put things right. I care about climate change enough to use the park and ride to work, but not enough to move to within walking distance. I care about success enough to regret accumulating regrets, but not enough to get good at something that would actually make a difference. I care about the environment enough to eat organic, but not enough to keep the leftovers for lunch to reheat. I care about injustice enough to write a poem, but not enough to go out and protest in the street. I care about poverty, but not enough to rob a bank. I care about peace, but not enough to lie in front of a tank. In this world drugged on money and media, when will this madness ever be stopped? I care enough to write a poem, but not enough to shout it from the rooftops. I fear so much for my kids' future. It feels like giving birth was a crime. I care enough to write a poem, but not enough to make the most of our time. Sometimes I drive myself crazy, doubting reality even exists. I care enough to write a poem, but not enough to slip my wrists. It seems words have become so cheap, they lost all meaning long ago. I care enough to write a poem, but not enough to not do so. Thank you.
Wow.
Sorry, I should have put a trigger warning
That
for...
probably sums up most of us. Well done, thank you. Next up, we have Juanita. Juanita Rea, are you there?
I am here.
Brilliant, welcome.
Okay. So I guess some trigger warnings then. The poem I'm reading is called I Wrote in Rooms, and I finished it just a few days ago, and it's a reflection on why I wrote and the things that writing helped me to live through, I guess. So I wrote in rooms. I wrote in rooms where I couldn't scream out loud, where horror movies played on repeat. I wrote in rooms where the TV was turned up to drown out all the shouting. I wrote in rooms where my voice was drowned out, too afraid to disturb adults fighting. I wrote in rooms where my breathing tightened up every time I heard doors banging. I wrote in rooms where I struggled to eat, my stomach always cramping. I wrote in rooms where I hid behind closed doors every time I had to go back home. I wrote in rooms where I wished I was a happier, more normal person. I wrote in rooms where I felt I was wrong, unable to put up the required pretense. I wrote in rooms that I tried to escape from, yet each time I had to return. I wrote in rooms where I loathed myself for feeling everything I didn't want to feel. I wrote in rooms where everything hurt and I tried to make it stop. I wrote in rooms where I never felt safe, never felt at ease. I wrote in rooms where feelings got stuck in my throat, where silent tears and sunken eyes went unnoticed. I wrote in rooms where we were supposedly safe. Family keeps you safe, don't they? I wrote in rooms where we didn't talk about the crimes that were being committed. I wrote in rooms where I wrapped shame around my body, despised, diseased, just hated. I wrote in rooms where hair hiding face meant heart covered up, avoided, ignored. I wrote in rooms where I hated everything I wrote. I wrote in rooms where I felt myself dying, not knowing that writing was helping me breathe. I wrote in rooms so I could let myself out. I wrote so that I could live. Thank you.
Whoa.
Wow. Yeah, thank you, Winita. That was wonderful.
Thank you.
And we have one other person. Rose Leonard. Rose, are you there? Sorry, I'm trying to find you.
I'm here.
Hi.
I feel like we ought to have a minute's silence after that one.
Yes, perhaps a deep breath.
That's amazing. Yeah. Mine's very different. We've probably all been noticing the birds in our gardens a lot more during lockdown and during the cold weather when we've maybe been feeding them. So this one's called Magpie. All bully boys strut and swagger, flaunty, jaunty and extravagant, flicking your tail feathers like a cocky 2 fingers at a world of modest, unassuming brown. You're decked out in 2-tone, black hood like an executioner's over spotless breast, wings washed with oily blue-green, exotic if I wasn't so accustomed to your garb. Through the glass your machine gun rattle grates, you gang up with your mates, pick fights and raucously brawl until I yell at you to break it up, and you launch explosive and take your couple-coloured chaos down the street. In farmers' fields, I've counted till rhyme runs out of reason, but I know what I'll find. Limp puppet of newborn lamb, emptied eye sockets, and blood around opened softness in the dawn. Yet in my garden, you're the flightiest. I can orchestrate with one arm from indoors to banish you, while blackbirds and pigeons feed on without alarm. You're here, you're gone, living on your wits with watchful eye. You walk that fine line between being driven from the garden, branded common thief and murderer, too clever by half, too bold, and on the other hand, the clown, whose antics make me laugh, or the messenger with secrets to be told.
Oh, lovely. Thank you so much, Rose. Beautiful. I have just been told that somewhere we have Doc Janning, all the way from Ohio. Are you there, Doc?
I am here.
Ah, brilliant. Welcome. Are you really in those daffodils, or is that a backdrop?
It's a backdrop. It's a photograph of what's called Daffodil Hill in Lakeview Cemetery here in the Cleveland area.
Brilliant. It's very beautiful.
It's like that every year.
Right, welcome anyway. You're just in time. We have to your open mic if you would like to. We had you on the reserve list, so we just got time to fit you in.
Okay, just a short one. This is titled The Great Perhaps. You may have heard that phrase before. It was supposedly uttered by Rabelais on his deathbed when he was reputed to have said, "I go to meet the great perhaps." Across a midnight sky, across the waters of Nepenthe, fly myriad compounds of hope and love on star winds of forever. They soar across the great perhaps of life, space, and time, rising into iridescent skies of midnight, unfolding into unknowns of infinite evermore. They seek the all among unexplored words and worlds of poetry, philosophy, belief, and magic. Thank you.
Thank you, Doc. That was beautiful. I'm so glad you managed to get here in time to read it. Thank you. Well, that finishes our open mic for tonight. I do apologise to any who didn't manage to get on. Please remember to email in as early as possible because we are getting a lot of requests. So although we try to squeeze as many people in as possible, we can't get everybody in. However, if you email for next time, we will put those who didn't read this time in first. Okay? That was brilliant. Can you all unmute yourselves and give a big round of applause for those open micers: Derek Doran, Kathy Carson, Jason Conway, Beth Brooke, Becky Hugh, Juanita Rea, Rose Leonard, and Doc Janning. Brilliant, thank you. Whew. Thank you very much, everybody. Okay, if you'd like to mute yourselves again now, that would be brilliant. Thank you. Because we are now, is everybody muted? Thank you. We're now going on to our feature poet, Adam Horovitz. It's giving me great pleasure to introduce Adam. Adam is a Stroud-based poet and performer and editor. His first full collection was Turning, published by Headland 2011. It was followed by A Thousand Laurie Lees, History Press 2014, and Little Metropolis, a CD of poetry and music commissioned by the Stroud Fringe Fest in 2015. He's one of Ledbury Poetry Festival's Versopolis poets and was poet in residence for Herefordshire and the Pasture-fed Livestock Association. His second full collection of poems, The Soil Never Sleeps, was released in a second extended edition in 2019. He co-presents the Thunder Mutters, a poetry and music podcast, and is one of 10 poets featured on Cerys Matthews and the Hidden Orchestra's album, We Come From the Sun, released on Decca in January 2021. Please, a big round of applause for Adam Horovitz.
Thank you, Josephine. It's lovely to be here. It's been a fantastic evening. It's great to share the bill with Zoe and with all of you who've read at the open mic. It's a fantastic array of different voices, and not a bum note in there. It was wonderful. So thank you. So the first poem I'm going to read is from the Pasture-fed Livestock Association book that I was commissioned to write, The Soil Never Sleeps, illustrated by Joe Sanders, who's here tonight, somewhere in there, behind a blank screen. And this is the title poem, The Soil Never Sleeps. The soil never sleeps. In its voids, gas and waters gather, waiting for thirsty roots to crawl down motorway tunnels dug by worms, for the spade, the plough, the massage press of hooves, for the rain to run through its seams, and seeds to push up to the light. The soil never sleeps. It banks lives in its soufflé stomach, connects them to everything. Even the dirt beneath fingernails, the dirt caught in a mole's coat, sings with a million microbes to the gram of connections, growth. The soil never sleeps, never slips into ideology or nostalgia. It is place and purpose, the perfection of decay, a story that shifts from mouth to mouth, a crucible for rebirth, a rooftop on another world. The next poem is also from The Soil Never Sleeps. This is from the extended edition. I wrote the book initially visiting four farms around England and Wales, one in the Yorkshire Dales, one in Kent, one in Cornwall, and one on the Welsh borders. And then I was commissioned to go to two more farms in Exmoor. So I'm going to read two poems from Exmoor. The first one, just on the edge of Exmoor, in a little village called Brendon, right at the start of the Coleridge Way, the walk that Coleridge used to take through Exmoor when he was living near Porlock and being interrupted by people from Porlock. This is Shelter. The wind's rhetoric crawls from skin to bone. A barren sermon come down the bare slopes, bits of old gods caught in its teeth. It gropes across the linn, cuts soil to the stone, bites at cattle till even bunched close they must seek shelter, an asylum inch under scraped together slats. White hides flinch inwards, warm now the wind's less bellicose. Returning later, no pulpit furore left echoing between hills. A lone calf, like a fragment of some old icon, leans through the doorway, its low, almost a laugh. A hymnal spit of light on faded greens. It magnifies the field's hidden glory. And the other poem from Exmoor was written right in the heart of Exmoor, at Westermill Farm near the village of Exford. And this a sheep and cattle farm. This is The Watch. Go higher, up beyond the coombs and rifts, out of the river's reach to the rough and bent low borders of farm and moor, where sky is an upturned bowl, and the language of sheep is limited, carried in fragments, beggared by sea winds. Even the dogs are reduced to other senses here, where sheep gather cloud as barbed wire gathers wool. Every surface is conjoined by a capillary web of water, spun ever finer as winter gives way, inch by bitter inch to spring. Only the lambs stretch up as if reaching for a hidden sun. Watch for the lambs that stray, the lambs that seek shelter other than the press of motherhood, the liminal wanderers, the escapologist questers after new risen grass, the moorland hawkbait in waiting, the run too far beyond. Watch as a mother watches. The next poems I'd like to read are from my first book, Turning, and three short ones, three from this. And first and foremost, another trigger warning for Greek mythology. This is Queen Hacuba's prayer. And Queen Hacuba was the defeated queen of Troy in the Trojan War. Queen Hecuba's prayer. If my voice cracks, it is not because I am weak. If I witness horror, I shall not become meek. If I start at shadows, it is not because I am scared. If my sons are broken, their pyres will be prepared. If I say little, it is not for want of words. If I lose my faith, feed me to the birds. The next poem from Turning, I've not read this one, not performed this one often. I'm reading it tonight because this is Crafty Crows and it's called Crowlight. They held the space between words, the crows, in the cold corner of the field where leaves arched from trees, a sullen, fading rainbow. Coarse as a mason's hand, they croaked the night into being, their song a caustic hymn of mildew, longing, dampened fear. I stood in sycamore shadow, unable to move beyond the dancing mask of leaves. Dusk built in me like smoke as they tore the day to shreds. I do not know if I cried out for the moon or murdered the sun with the tongue of a crow. And for the next poem from Turning, I'd like to invite Zoe to read.
Thank you, Adam. Very honoured to read your poems. This poem is called The Memory of Water. It was life to us, the rain in the cold days of upheaval before the fall. It was mouse patterings on a ceiling of leaves, a sweet disheveling, carrying the scent of change. Like the swallows, it came back and back again to the places it remembered. This dust wheel plain was forest once. Deep underneath, where nuts and seeds snuggle in, their ability to grow suspended by the drought, the memory of water echoes in empty caverns that were lakes, shivers in parched fibers, patient as a spider. Sometimes the rain came down in a ritual showering, a breathy song of cloud, or in the boomy slate grey mornings, it was the rush of trains. We marked the days with it, the seasons, as it balanced on the edge of the horizon like a scavenging gull. We were never sure whether we wanted it to break on our heads like dark, ripe apples, although we loved it when it came. But the rain that clung like silk, that slithered in through clothes to the moist valleys of the flesh, that is the rain I remember. The rain that sweetened the breath of the gardens, that clung to your breast like a kiss. That is the rain I will take with me to my dying. Let me show you with my lips exactly how it felt. Thank you.
Thank you, Zoe. Quite a personal poem to me, that one, and it's wonderful to hear it read. It takes it away and makes it something new. Strange, beautifully read. Thank you so much, Zoe. The next few poems I'm going to read are from my next book, which isn't out yet. It's coming out later this year from Indigo Dreams. Not only are we reading together, Zoe and I, but we're now on the same publishing label, which is great. This first poem is out of the countryside and into the city. For those of you who don't know, the term duende, which is in the title, is the Spanish feeling that of something that rises through you as you're making art or kind of dancing or making music, and it rises out of the earth and through you and out as poetry or song or whatever. So this is Inner City Duende. Now she is clockwork in the bus lanes, a bottled up talk of sorrow. All her straight lines are strung through a maze of stuttering street lamps. A slow build in the beer barrels to this, the banshee hour, louder than trains, the rhythms of her misery running on iron rods down into the hot, bright hells of Angel, Euston, Camden Town. The city swallows her, binds her in tarmac, trails pleasures behind her, a constellation of fractured glass. She weeps mascara. Her eyes are ideograms, untranslatable as she slashes the brambling arms of friends away. And then she is dancing to the dark sounds of her sorrow, the city's breath rising through her as she ripples, divided, multiplied, like a waterbound moon slipping through shop windows, as street neon carves her tears into the lights of cars. I used to walk through London, and always the edgelands drew my eye, the sharp borders between estates where decay and order met, the wildernesses where willow herb and ivy argued for space amongst bricks. The city's hum drowned by insects, broken hieroglyphs of graffitied wall, matched colour for colour by a riot of small flowers and butterflies that shuddered through nettles like ghosts of progress. These were my brief gardens, deep in the soft places where nature reimagined itself, pushed up against the weight of human rot and choked at its histories until they fell to sediment and dust. Like a prophecy of our absence, these places let through piece by piece a chronicle of suspended seed, millennia old from beneath the tarmac. I used to walk through London, watch plant life, learning how to out-dream us. Now, the next couple of poems are, the book that's coming out later in the year from Indigo Dreams is called Love and Other Fairy Tales. And it's not quite as cynical as the title suggests, the crux of the book. But there are a few fairy tale poems, and so these are a couple of them. First is Some Kind of Fairy Tale. What have you brought from the top of the keep? A heart in my mouth, a lover's leap. What did you learn from the bones of the past? The horror of finding my heart in a cast. What did you gain from love's first stroke? A river's roar, a raven's croak. Why have you hidden it for all these years? I was afraid to reach through the river of tears. And why you stood here answering still? It takes time for resolve to equal skill. And this is a fragment of a fairy tale caught in a time loop. He came struggling through the thorns, his sword out and his horse struggling through the thorns. He came breathing damp through the dense forest. He came struggling through his sword, through his horse, through the forest. He came breathing damp, a taste of love like rose petals struggling through the thorns. His horse like rose petals through the forest. His sword breathing damp in the dense forest, a taste of love, and his horse struggling through the thorns. His sword, his horse breathing damp like rose petals in the dense forest, struggling, struggling, whispering your name. And this poem is not from a fairy tale so much as from the book of Genesis, I suppose. It's called Beyond the Gates. What we took from the garden was love, for love is knowledge, and the knowledge of love is a bitter seed in the belly of a bird. Expelled over new lands, the seed falls as love into the soil, casts out slender roots to grow and seed and grow again, carried further and further from the garden in unending chains of fruiting trees. The trees hold the garden as memory in a lover's embrace, as the sun is sucked by leaves, consumed in adoration and exchange. And age becomes knowledge, becomes love as their trunks swell over time into rings, and each ring binds us to the garden because what we took from the garden was love, and love was the garden, and it is the garden that keeps us breathing each other in here in the cold land beyond its gates as it pumps through our hearts like blood. Jason, I don't know if you got my message earlier. I'm going to read 3 new poems. Could you pause the recording at this point, please? Zoe, particularly, for being such a brilliant co-reader.
Thank you, Adam.
Thank you.
Jason, could you record again for just a short while? Yeah. That was amazing, Adam. I'm sort of lost for words at the moment. I mean, there was so, in the end, I didn't try to capture anything. I just let all the words and phrases pour over me because there was too much to capture, too much wonderful stuff. One thing came out in my mind though: watch plant life outdream us. That caught somewhere in the whole thing, and that was beautiful, beautiful. Thank you, Zoe. Thank you, Adam, for doing this joint cross reading. I think it works so well. Your voice is really, you can read each other's poems with no problem at all, and it's just as rich. So please, everybody, would you unmute now and give an enormous applause to Adam Horovitz for that wonderful reading. Somebody's put in here, it was like a masterclass, and it is. It's the next, for me, it's like listening to something else that I can't wait for the book. I need to read it. So I'm really looking forward to it. Thank you. And now a big applause to Zoe because she was wonderful as well.
True.
And that is the end of our evening, but what an evening. I mean, everything was so rich. The open mic was so varied, but so good. It was wonderful. I'm going, just before I finish, could we mute, please, because we've got some feedback. I don't know how that's coming in, but if we could, because I just have a couple of things to say before we finish. I did mention a couple of things earlier on, but I didn't mention slam lines. Slam lines 3 is our trial 45-minute event, short and sharp, with slam poets doing 1 poem each. Now, if you've missed this in the past, do try and get there for number 3. It's on the 16th of March at 8 o'clock, and it is literally for a very short time. But we have Brian Reed as our co-host, Stephen Mohammed, Eve Piper, Callum Wensley, Lexi Tomlinson, and Sophie Sparham, all of them great poets. So just come in and listen. We have a 3 open mic draw spot. So if you want to put your name down, please do, same email, but you will have a draw situation on the night. It's fabulous. It's such fun. Everybody who's come says it is, and we will only be doing this 3 for the moment. So that is basically it. There is just one little piece of information that I will give you. People who are hosts don't often get the chance to read. And I'm so pleased that I'm going to get the chance to read at the Cheltenham Poetry Festival on Thursday, the 18th of March at 7 o'clock with the marvellous Claire Dyer, who's just had her new her new collection, Yield, launched. So if you can come along and join us, it will be marvellous. So you will actually hear some of my poems. And I also have put together a collection which hopefully will be launched at the end of April, called A Quietus, and I will be reading a few from that. And I think that's everything. So if you'd like to stop.
Next month.
Oh, next month. I beg your pardon. I knew I'd forget something. Too many pieces of paper here. Yes, next month, Crafty Crows will be featuring Saili Katabi. And that is on Wednesday, the 7th of April at 7 o'clock. Oh, and also we will be having a 10-minute open mic slot from Carol Shepherd. So that's going to be very lovely. So please put your hands together, give a big, enormous applause to everybody who's performed tonight. Please unmute yourself and give your appreciation. That's brilliant. You will find on the chat, you can give a donation if you so wish. Right. Gloucestershire Poetry Society. And that is the cut, Jason. Thank you. Thank you.